Welcome to the Christian Woman Leadership Podcast, where we hope to inspire you to embrace your God-given gifts, skills, and passions in order to lead with confidence. We want you to remember that you are fearfully and wonderfully made in the image of God, and you are fully loved by Him.
You have been designed on purpose by God with unique gifts and passions in order to love and lead those around you. I'm your host, Esther Littlefield, a pastor's wife, business owner, mom, and writer.
And I'm Esther's co-host, Holly Kane. I'm a wife, mom, and business owner. I also write at hollykane.org, where I focus on my passion for women's ministry.
Together, we chat about important issues that Christian women leaders face. In addition, we interview other women just like you who lead in various roles, from church to community to business. Through this podcast, we offer you encouragement, tools, and resources to help you on your leadership journey. We are so glad you're here with us. Welcome to episode 48 of the podcast. Today, I am here with Holly. Hey, Holly, how you doing?
Hey, I'm good. How are you?
I'm awesome. And I am excited. We are starting a new series today on the podcast. So we're going to be talking about wellness and staying healthy as a leader. And we really feel like this is an important topic for us as women in leadership.
Yeah.
So let's start, Holly, just by talking about what do we mean by wellness, right?
Okay.
What is this topic actually about? What are we going to be talking about?
So wellness, according to the dictionary, because we love our dictionary definitions, is the quality or state of being healthy in body and mind, especially as the result of deliberate effort. So yeah, I like that definition.
Yeah, but I feel like the way I see it is kind of more than that, because I think it's more than just body and mind. So I feel like it covers just the concept of overall health and intentionally investing in yourself so that you can stay healthy as a person, as a leader. And I also think that wellness is really about a lifestyle and not just like some magic formula or some kind of really strict, rigid, or routine that everyone has to follow.
Yeah.
So with wellness, there are 4 main areas that I have written about before on my blog, and those are the 4 areas that we're going to cover in this episode, and actually we're going to do 2 episodes about this topic. So they are physical wellness, spiritual wellness, personal wellness, and relational wellness. And obviously that isn't everything. That's not all encompassing to our entire lives. But those are kind of the 4 buckets that we're putting a lot of this into. And so today, this episode, we're going to really dive deep into the first 2. We're going to talk about spiritual wellness and physical wellness. And then next time, we'll go more into the personal and the relational, right?
Right. But all of these areas of wellness are super interconnected. And so if one area is really unhealthy, then it's going to impact the others. And so it's really important for us to talk about each individual area and just kind of identify what it sort of means in each one of those categories and how we can work on each one of those.
Yeah.
Another way that wellness can be referred to is as self-care. So, which is just basically taking care of yourself so that you can function and give your best to God and others. As we've talked about in a previous episode, self-care, that word sometimes gets a little bit of a bad rap.
Yeah.
But what we're really talking about is making sure that you're sort of, if you will, a well-oiled machine to be able to serve others. So it's not for the function of selfishness or for just inward looking. It's about being well to take care of others. So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Let's start, before we dive into the 2 areas that we're going to cover today, let's just start by talking about why does this matter? I think you kind of just touched on it a little bit, but why does it matter for us to talk about wellness, to have it be a focus of the podcast? And what are some of the reasons that we can see that this is important? So do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah. So first off, I think it's an example to those that we are leading. I mean, I don't know about you, but I have been in a place where I've been under leadership where I know for a fact that people are not well, and it definitely affects how they lead. And, sometimes I just have felt like saying, just you need to take a day off maybe. Have, you
Right.
know, that sort of thing. So, it's about being able to function well,
Yeah.
and we want to be an example for those that we lead so that they will feel like they have permission to do it for themselves as well. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
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 and really I see the part of this is that leadership and ministry are marathons, not a
yeah,
sprint. And
yeah.
sometimes we treat everything in leadership and everything in our ministry or our business like it's a sprint, and we just run and run and run and go so hard, and we hear the word hustle and we hear, do these things. But that leads to unhealthy lifestyle, unhealthy, um, just overall well-being. It, like you said, it leads to people not leading well because they are so crazy with their life and all the things they're doing
Mhm.
that nothing is being done well, and
Yep.
that results in broken relationships and all kinds of things. So really, we feel like if we do not prioritize our health, no one else will.
Mhm.
No one else is going to come to me and say, Esther, you really need to be doing XYZ. I mean, maybe I guess that could happen on occasion, but for the most part, people
Right.
aren't taking care of me and my health and my well being. It's really up to me to do that. So, we touched on this a little bit in episode 36. We talked about ditching balance for surrender, and we kind of got into the concept of overwhelm and how that can affect us as
Mhm.
leaders and as women, especially. And one of the strategies that we discussed was this concept of surrendering your heart and really giving things over to God. But also, part of that was this idea of wellness and taking care of yourself as part of that process.
Yeah.
So it's all so important for us to really focus on this area.
And I think that if we don't really get on sort of the same page as where we are with our overwhelm, it can really lead to burnout. And so, avoiding burnout is really important. And if you're getting to the point where you can no longer function and you have to completely step back from everything, that's also not good either.
So yeah, I agree. I think that one of the factors in why we're talking about wellness is that we want people to avoid complete burnout, and investing in our wellness is one of the ways that we can do that. And then also, I think the other thing that we want to avoid is not necessarily just personal burnout, but a complete ministry breakdown or a major loss within our ministries. When leaders are not healthy, they, really negative things can happen, and it affects not just that person, it affects the entire ministry, the entire business, the entire church, whatever it might be. So, it seems like every day lately I'm hearing about a pastor or a leader or a business leader who's had a personal crisis that has either led them to having to resign, be fired, or even worse, sometimes we hear about people committing suicide. And I know that's not something to be taken lightly, and we're not saying that we have the answers to that here in this episode. We're not
Right.
mental health professionals, and that's definitely a very serious issue. But I do think that there are things that we can do individually to stay healthy for the long term, and also things that we need to do to get more professional help at times, which we'll hit on probably in some of our topics here.
Yeah.
So, why don't we start, Holly, by just talking about what Jesus did in his ministry? Because we like to look to Jesus as our leader,
Yep.
obviously, and as a great example to us in how we should operate. So, what are some of the things that we saw him do when he was here on earth and ministering to other people?
So as I was sort of looking at this, I really liked the fact that he didn't push his way into his ministry. And what I mean by that is he waited until it was time for him to actually start ministering. He didn't actually, sort of like try to make it happen. So if we were thinking about it in our terms and in our mindset, we would think that if, a Messiah was coming and he was going to, save the world, let's say, he would have to sort of minister for his whole life to make an impact, when in fact he only ministered for 3 years of the 33 years that he was on earth. One of the other things that I really enjoyed while looking at this was realizing that Jesus took away from his ministry time in big chunks and little chunks. So
Yeah.
he went off and he fasted and prayed. He was able to sort of what he would pull away from the crowds when he felt like they were overtaking him, but then at other times he allowed them to kind of swarm around him. And so I really like that idea of the fact that he was able to sort of go away when he needed to, and he was able to allow the crowds to sort of just be right on top of him at the same time. So
Yeah. Yeah, and he did things like fasting and praying. Like he actually went and talked to God and he was God. So it's like this crazy thought that uh he did things to stay healthy and to be able to continue ministering because he was still human. He still
Mhm.
had the human needs of rest and of eating and, all the things that we talk about. So he didn't do ministry 24/7. He didn't burn himself to the ground even during that most intense period of ministry. We saw those examples of him stepping away like you said. So I think that's a good starting point for us to just refer to and to realize that again, when we're talking about wellness, when we're talking about self-care, we're not talking about it in the sense of, you know, just do what you want and just fill yourself up all the time and just be focused on yourself and only what you need. That's not the model that we are taking at all with this topic. We're really taking the topic of or the approach that in order for us to have a long-term ministry and a healthy life long term and a healthy family and all the things that most of us want, we
Yeah.
actually have to be intentional about how we're living every single day and how we are taking care of ourselves. So, I think we'll go ahead and dive into our first area of wellness that we're going to talk about. And we're going to start with spiritual wellness because this really is foundational to everything. I mean, we've talked about them that everything is interconnected. And I feel like
Mhm.
if spiritual wellness is off and if you are not healthy in that area, then really your life is gonna be challenging. And not that it's not going to be challenging if you if you are spiritually healthy, but 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 it's really gonna be more of a struggle if you're not investing in your spiritual wellness. So, what do we mean by spiritual wellness? Let me just sort of identify how I describe this. Basically, the way I look at it is your spiritual wellness is growth and nurturing your soul and taking care of your spirit. So, again, it's really comes back to your relationship with God and how you're connecting with Him and how you are staying healthy on an ongoing basis with your spirit and your soul. So, let's talk about some of the ways or some of the things that we should do, Holly, to take care of ourselves and our spiritual wellness. What are some of the things that you think are important in this area?
So definitely, I mean, you all know I'm going to say this first and foremost is connecting with God daily, developing habits that will help you do this. So prayer, reading God's word, all of those spiritual disciplines are really important on a daily basis to be working on because they, as we said, are the foundations of this spiritual wellness thought or idea, one of the pillars of wellness, if you will. So
Yeah.
that's really, really important. I think the other thing is we need to know the truth. So when we're going through things and when we have struggles, if we know the truth and it's really instilled in us, in our mind and in our hearts, then we'll have that much more strength and that much more discernment when we're going through all of these different
Yeah.
things that we have to deal with. So
Right. And having that daily connection with God and that time to read God's word on a regular basis and not in the sense of a rigid rule or, if you don't do it, you're in trouble. It's not about that. But it's really about if I'm in God's word every day, I'm going to begin to understand the truth more effectively. And like you said, when I'm up against a difficult time, I'm going to have that already in my heart and in my mind to be able to get through the situation.
yeah.
And then I think too, dealing with spiritual warfare. There are times when we are experiencing spiritual warfare and when there are truly battles being fought,
Mhm.
that we can't see. It's not against flesh and blood, as we know. And so having a routine and being equipped with the armor of God and all the things that we know about in the Bible is going to help us stay healthy spiritually. It's going to help us to be able to fight those battles. And if we are going, days or weeks or months without being in connection with God, in a relationship with Him, then when those situations arise, we are not going to be equipped and ready to fight those battles.
Mhm.
So I
Mhm.
think this is really just the most important area for us to be focusing on. There's other benefits here too, or other ways that we can invest in our spiritual wellness. I think another one is just attending church, just being in a church body in a local community. That's something I'm really passionate about because I feel that God has set that up, the local church, as the way for us to have community with other believers on an ongoing
Yeah.
basis, right?
Yeah,
And it's
definitely.
it's not just it's not just to benefit us, but it's actually to benefit the body. We all have gifts that we can share with each other. And if we're not in a local church, it's going to be harder for us to use our gifts to benefit other Christians on an
Yeah.
ongoing basis, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like it's in those relationships and in those different things that you do within the body that really refine us. And so I feel like another piece of that is being involved in small groups. So whether it's a Bible study or like a home group, something like that, it's I have found in my personal journey in my life that those are the places where you're really able to wrestle with different things that you might be questioning or that you don't fully understand or that you have a hard time with. Those are the places that I've been able to wrestle with those things and have really come out for the better because other Christians, other people within that, small group have poured into me their wisdom, their discernment, those sorts of things. So
Yeah.
without having sort of a place that you're intentionally doing that, it doesn't just happen. And so I think that attending a church is the first step, but then even more on a deeper level would be being part of small groups or Bible studies, that sort of
Yeah,
thing.
absolutely.
Um, I think one other thing that we kind of sometimes lose sight of is to be aware of what you're consuming. Now, this is on a lot of different levels, right? So you are consuming things from media, TV, social media. You're also consuming stuff that people are saying to you. So conversations that you have, sort of the people that you're around, the different environments that you're a part of. Those are all things that whether you realize it or not, you're consuming that information and you're sort of pulling that in. So I don't know if you've ever dealt with this, but for me personally, if I've been around people that swear a lot, it's easy for me to just pop out a swear every once in a
Mhm.
while. And it's like, I'm hearing it, it becomes part of what I'm thinking, what I'm digesting, and so therefore it's easier for it to come out.
Yeah.
So being aware of that is very, very important. So,
Yeah. Yeah, and so in along those lines, to be intentional about the types of books you're reading or the podcast you're listening to. And again, we're not trying to say like rigid, hard and fast rules. I think that's between you and God in terms of where where the line is for you.
mhm.
But I think you can be intentional about like, hey, you're listening to the Christian Woman Leadership Podcast. I hope that's a one that's going to encourage your spirit and help you
Yeah.
grow in your spiritual wellness. But
Yep.
there's so many more out there that can do that, and books, audiobooks, whatever it might be, that will help you, that will feed your soul and your spiritual wellness and not deplete it, or not,
Mhm.
like you said, fill up your mind with things that are not healthy,
Right, right.
um, and then I think too, like, being intentional about who you are following, who you are being mentored by, discipling and being discipled by others. this is going to help you grow in your spiritual wellness. And looking for people in your life that you can turn to follow their lead in spiritual things. Again, not to put them on a pedestal, not to put them above your relationship with God, but to say, okay, they seem to have a really spiritual, a really healthy life, and they seem to really have a commitment to spiritual wellness. So I want to kind of emulate what they're doing in a lot of ways.
Yeah. And I think one other way that maybe you might not think of is service. So being able to serve others, I have found has been a big catalyst in my spiritual journey. Um, and it kind of is an intense sort of microcosm when you think of like specifically mission trips, but those are really great ways that you kind of get outside of yourself. You stop thinking about, you know, your personal struggles, your personal things, and you just are able to go and work. And so that is kind of really, I wouldn't necessarily say the ultimate example, but it's a very intense example of being able to get outside of yourself. But it's not necessarily just about, you know, mission work, something where you take a big chunk of time. I mean, this is something that should be or can be part of a weekly, monthly routine that helps remind you that you're not the center of the universe. That's kind of one of the things that I have found about service. It
Yes.
reminds me that I'm not the, you know, end all be all of
Yeah.
everything, and my life is really about service and kingdom work.
Yeah.
And as we're talking about the wellness, how I set my life up should be in service to others. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
And again, if we look back at what Jesus did, I mean, the majority of what he did during his ministry was serving others. You know, he
Yeah.
did take those breaks, he did step away, but for the most part, what we read about is him ministering to other people and
Hmm.
pouring into them. And so
Yeah.
that's absolutely should be part of that of our spiritual wellness.
Yeah. Yeah. And then the last sort of thing that I just think is a really good little caveat to talk about is to kind of be aware of your closest relationships. And so if you have someone who's very, very close to you, a family member, and they are not in a really great place spiritually, that can take a toll on you. This is not to say like cut those people out of your life or anything like that, but it's just to be aware and to understand that perhaps if you are kind of feeling like you're in a slump or, you know, something like that, it may be because that person is either, you know, filling the areas that you're consuming with some negative stuff, or they don't view things maybe the way that you do, or they're not quite in the same place that you are, and that's okay. But I just think it's good to be aware of your how your closest relationships are, um, from a spiritual standpoint, so that either you can guard your heart or guard your soul, or, you know, you can be looking at it as a way to invest in others around you to sort of spur them on spiritually. So
Yeah.
it's just a sort of awareness thing rather than, you know, maybe a specific action
Yeah.
that we are suggesting. It's more of an awareness
Yeah,
of
absolutely.
what's around you. So yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So that kind of gives some pointers for you in terms of how you can invest in your spiritual wellness. So, what we're going to do for each of these topics is just quickly, Holly and I will share what it looks like for each of us and kind of some of the habits that we try to include in our life in how we practice this. Because I think for everybody, it will look a little bit different, but there's a few things that we'll just share our own personal experience with. So, Holly, you want to share what yours looks like for the spiritual wellness?
Yeah. So, I I mean, so daily communing with God is a big one. I, over the years, have not been super great at this in a consistent manner, and definitely being able to work for myself and work from home has been huge in that, and has been very helpful. So just, reading the Bible, meditating, praying, journaling, music, just sort of setting the tone of the day and, my house. I'm the only one here other than the dog, but
Yeah.
I get to pick that. And
Yeah.
so being intentional about that has been a big thing for me. I've already sort of touched on these other two, but serving others has been huge for me. I am really good at getting in my own head, and I'm really good at only thinking about what I'm going through. And so, as I talked about before, it really gets me out of that. And then unity with other believers has been huge for me as well. Just having those people around me who are pouring into me from their experiences and their own spiritual walks has been huge, and has been huge to open my mind to things that I have not been able to see for whatever reason, whether it be sin or mindset or whatnot. They have brought things up for me and have really opened my mind to what God wants to put in it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Definitely. Yeah.
what about you, Esther? What does it look like for you?
Yeah. So I think it's a similar thing for me in over the years. It's looked a little bit different at different phases of my life. But right now my goal is to be up before my family. That's getting a little bit harder because my daughter seems to be getting better at waking up in the morning and getting ready for school, which is weird. I'm happy about it, but I no longer have I need to get up earlier if I want to be up before her. However, regardless, at some point in the day, spending time reading God's word. I do a lot of writing, and that's kind of one of the ways that I pray. So, like you, journaling, but that's a lot of times my journaling is my prayer.
Yeah.
And then I really love like one of the ways that I feel most connected with God and that I feel like helps me to clear my head is to get outside. And so sometimes it looks like going for a walk or just sitting out on my deck and, having time with God in that way. And then I would say too, I really like doing a deeper study in God's word sometimes with
Mm,
going into like the original languages and digging a little bit deeper. And so sometimes that might be preparing for a small group study or reading something and going deeper. That's something I really enjoy doing, and I find it helps me to stay healthy because I get to know better the original meanings of what the words were that were written.
yeah.
And then I would say too, just like ongoing, like you said, being in church on a regular basis, like even in this past few months, I've traveled a lot and I've missed church several times because
Mhm.
I've been traveling. And I
Yeah.
noticed a difference in how I felt. And I was still in God's word. I was still, having regular communication with Christians. Like I was still in community, but that the difference was that I wasn't actually in in my local church body every
Mhm.
week like I normally am. So I do feel like that makes a difference. And I would also agree with you in terms of service. Whenever I go and do something, even when I don't feel like it, when I go and serve in some way,
Yeah.
it shifts my attitude, it shifts my perspective,
Mhm.
and helps me to actually remember, oh yeah, like you said, I am not the center of the universe. this this life is not about me.
Yeah.
And then I think I want to mention one other thing that we kind of didn't mention earlier, and it made something you said made me think of it. So, in terms of spiritual wellness, I think a huge thing that we actually need to be including is basically a practice of accountability and
Yes.
confession and
Mhm.
recognizing our sin.
Yeah.
And that's something that more and more is I am recognizing the importance of. And I think that's where a lot of the leadership issues that are happening in churches, big and small,
Yep.
a lot of ones that we don't even hear about because they're in small churches and they don't make the headlines. But that piece, if that's not there for us as leaders, if we don't have someone that we are confessing to or that we are talking to about our challenges and talking to about our struggles, it's really easy to get off track and
Yeah.
to fall and to get into sin that we start excusing and we start making justification for, and that's a
Yeah.
dangerous place to be. So
I'm glad you mentioned that because I think it's worth sort of pulling out, I sort of kind of encapsulate that with like the daily communing with God.
Yeah.
To me, that's part of it. But
Hmm.
I'm really glad that you sort of lifted it out and talked about it, because if you are if you're just reading and then sort of putting it down and not engaging with it, then I can see how that might be overlooked. So it's really important to mention
Yeah.
that repentance and dealing with sin
Yeah.
is should be a part of your daily routine with God.
Yeah.
And
Right. And it should be with him, but then it should also be with your
yeah,
local church or your small,
yes,
really more of your small group or somebody that you're
yeah,
meeting with
a
for,
smaller number of
yeah,
people. Yeah,
just not necessarily up in front of everybody.
yeah.
So, okay. All
Okay.
right. Let's move on to our next area of wellness, which is physical wellness. So,
Yeah.
this one, can be a touchy subject. I know for sure. Uh, but let me again sort of define what I have meant by it when I've talked about it in the past, and what I think sometimes people assume it means. So it doesn't mean that you are going to be focused on having the perfect body, or that you never get sick, or that you are eating 100% organic homemade foods all the time. Um, or necessarily living to 80 or 100. Like, there's no guarantees in terms of
Right.
our physical wellness. And I also want to mention that I know there are some people that are dealing with some kind of physical illness
Mm,
that impacts this, and
yeah.
and it really, that needs to be taken into consideration. But regardless of all of that, I do believe that it is biblical for us to take care of our body to the best of our ability, in in the sense that our body is the temple of the Holy Spirit, and it's the place where God resides in us as a Christian. So being intentional again about caring for our bodies, I think, is a good thing to do. And again, if our body isn't healthy, it's going to impact all the other areas of our leadership and of our wellness. So uh, do you have any thoughts on that, Holly, in terms of just generally what it means to you?
Yeah, so when I think about it, it kind of brings up the idea of stewardship to me. It's in the same way that you are given money to steward by God, we're also given our bodies, and we are to be stewarding those as well. And so it's just sort of the idea that we didn't earn it. God gave us these bodies, and so we are to honor Him with them. And so it's more the idea of stewardship in my mind.
Yeah.
And I'm not great at this. I'll just say that right now. I'm not great at this, but I have done different things over the years to try to work on this and um, sort of become better at it. But it's definitely not always easy. So
Yeah. Yeah, and and I meant to mention that at the beginning too, to just basically say, look, we do not have this all together.
yeah.
None of these areas of wellness do I
Oh,
feel like I am just like in any way perfect or doing amazing all
yeah.
the time. There are
Yeah.
cycles and there are challenges, and generally speaking, there may be one area that we feel really, really good about, and then other areas that we're like, oh, this is not so good. And that's
Right.
part of why we're going to have the quiz and some ways to help you with that. But
Right.
I'll just hit on a few things in terms of physical wellness that I feel like are important as we are trying to take care of our bodies, right? And it's a journey and it's a process. And so this none of this is meant to be a guilt trip or meant to
Mm-mm.
be something
Right.
where we're like, oh, if you're not doing these things, then you're not really
Right.
a good person. So okay, so a few of the things are, just moving our bodies, whether we want to call that exercise or fitness or just moving, however it makes you feel good about talking about it. Some people have an averse reaction to the word exercise. So we know that exercise has a lot of health benefits. I mean, the facts and figures are out there. Um, Aside from just the typical ideas of how it can help you lose weight or help you look different, it's really about how it's going to help your health long term.
Right.
Another big thing, obviously, is how we eat. The food that we put into our body makes a difference in how we feel, and it makes a difference in how our wellness is in general. Um, and then just my personal approach to this is that I'm not a big fan of diets and extreme exercise routines. I feel like that is often a challenge because it's a quick fix. It's kind of like a band-aid. It will do the trick for a little while, but then if it's not something you can sustain for the long term, or if it's not truly addressing the core issues, then it's not going to produce the long-term results that we're looking for. So
Right.
I'm a big fan of finding things that you can sustain for the long term. Habits that feel good to you and that help you. They're not always going to be easy, but I feel like moderation is key, you know?
Yeah.
And so I don't know, do you have thoughts on that, Holly, or
Well,
other things that you feel are
yeah,
helpful?
so when you said the word moderation, I was immediately brought back to high school, like, because, our phys ed slash health teacher always she just kind of I this is the one thing I remember from that class was moderation and variety. So, um, having a variety to your diet as far as not just sticking with, like, the only 3 vegetables that you will eat, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Trying to expand your palate with that variety, and then not going overboard on any one thing.
yeah,
So that has always been something that I remember and is kind of a good guideline really for a lot of things.
yeah.
We have a society where we like to just go intensely on something, and
Mhm.
sometimes it's best to just sort of have moderation and variety in your life. So,
Yeah,
another one is habits. So, as we've talked about before, like these things just don't happen. You can't just write them down on a list and then all of a sudden you're exercising. Like these are choices that you have to make on a daily
Uh-huh.
basis, and you have to make room for them. Habits don't just happen on their own. You have to find the time. You have to intentionally put them either on your calendar or in on your daily routine. So we talked more about habits in episode 31. So if you are interested in learning more about that and just the conversation that we had, go back to episode 31 and listen to that. So,
Yeah. And I think it's important to remember that, like, I think the challenging thing with this one in particular is that our physical wellness habits usually don't impact us right away. Like, usually, if I eat a salad, I'm not all of a sudden healthier the next day, right?
right, right.
If I choose, to exercise one day, I actually might be in pain the next day instead of like, oh, I've got so much energy, I can conquer the world. So the hard part about it is that it takes time but it does produce results, 2 years from now, 5 years from now, oh, even a couple months from now, we might start to see some of the changes that our choices today make.
Yeah.
So it's definitely a challenging one, but I think it's super important. Um, any other ways that you think we need to be investing in our physical health?
Yeah, so I think a big one is sleep and rest. I think that in sort of the society that we're in, we're encouraged to go long hours and, burn the midnight oil, and that's okay sometimes. That needs to happen. But in as a general rule, as a guideline for your life, are you getting enough sleep? And or rest. So are you taking the time to just relax, maybe lay down, read a book, or whatever that looks like for you is also really important. Just
Yeah.
constantly working your fingers to the bone is not healthy. And so that's something that needs to be sort of top of mind and part of this whole routine. And then the last thing for me is sort of listening to your body. We kind of know when things aren't right and things aren't working well. Your body has a really great way of telling you those things. And sometimes we choose to ignore it. And so those sort of prompts from our body become less and less loud, if you will, in our minds. But when you know something isn't right and you need to go see a doctor, just do it.
Yeah.
I'm not great at this. I will be honest with you. I
Mhm.
am really good at just brushing things to the side and just sort of letting them go, even though I know, and I'm reminded whenever that sort of cue comes to my mind, you really need to be on top of this, or you really need to talk to someone about this or whatever. Listening to your body is a huge thing, I think, as part of physical wellness. And the more you do it, the better you get at it. The less you do it, the harder it is. So whatever those cues are that you're getting, listening to them and responding to them is a great way to learn how to do it better and to continue to do it more. So,
Yeah,
do you have any thoughts
absolutely.
on that?
Yeah, no, I think I agree. I agree
Yeah.
with that, especially the sleep thing. I think so often, if I'm having a really bad day or if things are not going well in my marriage or other things like that, like sometimes it's just a matter of I haven't had enough sleep. I haven't had enough
Yeah,
rest.
it's true.
And the next day, after I've had a good night's rest, I suddenly have a very different perspective on
Yep.
the issue,
Yeah,
And so
definitely.
it makes such a difference. So let's talk about some of the ways that we are just what this looks like for us, our physical
Yeah.
wellness in our life right now. I'll start by sharing some of mine. So again, I've mentioned this, but I've really gone through different phases. I've had phases where I have been super duper good at physical wellness and I have been exercising really regularly and really eating clean and being pretty uh healthy about it. That's not what I meant to say. I've had phases where I've been really, really good in this area. But really, over the past year or two, I've had a much more full season in terms of my workload and the things that have been going on in our lives. And so I have allowed exercise to slip, and I have allowed even some of my healthy eating habits to slip. And so right now I'm in a phase of trying to get back on track. Like I'm just trying to be back on track with some of that. And so for me, I have a Fitbit that I wear and I have a goal of daily steps, which we've talked about that too in some of the habits episodes we did at the beginning of the year. But really it's just I've tried to pare my goals down to make them doable for me. And really the idea of just moving my body more frequently has been one
Yeah.
of them. And I'm in a phase where I'm actually trying to exercise 3 days a week. So that's my goal right now because I know that when I exercise, I feel better. And it's not even for any particular goal of like, oh, I want to look a certain way or lose weight or something like that. It's really just I know that when I do it, my mental health is better, my energy level is better. And then in terms of food, I do try to eat healthy like I said. My goal is mostly to eat clean, but I, again, have not been super good at that recently. And so I've had to just give myself more grace and
Mhm.
know that it's been a season. And so we're going to go back into a season of being a little bit better about it right now. And I know that meal prep is a big thing and a big factor in how we eat in my household. So
Yeah.
planning my meals is something that I need to really buckle down on and I know it'll make an impact for me. So, what about you, Holly? What does it look like right now for you?
I think a big thing for me and sort of over these different seasons of life, having moved to a climate where I can get outside every day, um, is a really kind of a big deal. It's good. It's wanting to have more of an active lifestyle. When we lived in Maine, I didn't like going out in the snow. I'll just be honest with you. And so you get 6 months out of the year when you're just inside.
Yeah.
And so that is a challenge. And now, working from home, it can also be a challenge because you have to sort of stop what you're doing and make sure you get outside.
Yeah.
So it's all about intentional choices. And I do always feel better when I am making intentional choices. Um, I think that obviously healthier eating always makes me feel better. But again, like you said, we do so much better when there's meal prep. When I have a day when I'm just kind of slogging through all the work and my husband gets home from work and he's like, what's for dinner? And I'm like, I don't know. I haven't even thought about it today because I've just been thinking about work all day long. So I have to sort of, on one hand, push myself a little bit more, and then on the other hand, give myself grace. So it's kind of
Yeah.
about knowing which thing to do when,
Mhm.
but a little
Yeah.
bit of both. And then, really, I think the key to a lot of this for me has been finding activities that I love doing. So we spend a lot of time outside when we lived in Maine in the summertime. and that was so much easier. I loved going for a walk. We were by a lake quite often, so we were every single day we were either swimming or on the boat or we were kayaking or even fishing. I mean, you're walking out, you're going out and you're doing some of those things. And so for me, finding the things that I love doing has been helpful because it almost takes out that hard choice. Do I really
Mhm.
want to go stand on a treadmill for 30 minutes? No, that's a harder choice to make than going to get in my kayak and going for a kayak for half an
Yeah.
hour. I would much rather do that. So
Yeah.
finding those activities that I really love doing has been a lot more helpful in making those intentional choices and having just a healthier, active lifestyle. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And I think that's really, really key. I like that you ended on that point because finding stuff that you like doing that can be exercise or physical
Hmm.
activity is so key. I've seen so many women struggle with this because they think that exercise has to look a certain way. It has to mean
Hmm.
going to the gym and, like you said, going on the treadmill for 45 minutes, or
Yeah.
it has to look like doing a P90X video and like practically dying, or, it
Yeah.
has to look a certain way when it really doesn't have to. You have to find things, again, that are going to be sustainable for you that you're going to like doing. If
Yeah.
you hate doing it every time, it's going to be tough to keep up with it.
Yeah.
And I do think the more we exercise, the more we figure out what we do like. So sometimes you might need to try different things to
Hmm.
figure out what you like. For me, I figured out I really love stand-up boarding. And I did that one time and I was like, oh my word, I love this. So I have a goal right now to save up and to buy a stand-up paddleboard for the
Ooh,
summer because I
cool.
know that it will be a form of exercise and it will also be something I will really enjoy.
I've
So
always wanted to try one of those.
oh
So
my word, when you come back to Maine this summer, I
yeah.
will have one and you will have to try it.
Okay.
So let's wrap this up. So really we want to encourage you and remind you a couple things. One is that all these areas are interconnected and we really we believe that we need to be intentional because naturally things tend to deteriorate, not improve, right?
Yes.
We don't tend to get better just naturally.
Because
Everything
right.
goes downhill. If you don't clean your house for a week, what happens? It becomes a mess, right?
Yeah.
So the other thing I would say about all these areas of wellness is if the things that we've been talking about, if something has resonated and you're like, oh my word, I need to do this and this and this, and you have a list of 10 things that you think you need to start doing, a back up for a minute and don't try to fix everything at once. Don't try to change everything all at once.
Okay, so like we do every single time that Esther and I talk, we have a fun question that we end on. And so our question today is if you were a Friends character, which one would you be? I want to hear your answer first.
Oh, okay. Well, my answer is going to be Monica. Most everybody that I know and anybody that has watched Friends will understand that typically I
Mhm.
would I would fit in the Monica mold. However, there are a few differences between me and Monica. I'm
Yes.
not quite as crazy as she is when it comes to cleaning. I do like things to be clean, but I am not as obsessive as she is about it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
if my husband wants to clean, like Chandler tried to do, I will 100% allow him to clean as much as he wants. I'm not gonna have a problem with it. Now, he might do it wrong, but I will still be happy that he
Oh,
did
absolutely.
make
Yeah.
an effort. So oh, anyway, but I love like there's one episode where she is having a party and she's she's like creating organized fun. And that is like so something I would do. I'd be like, okay, guys, let's get out our pens and let's do a little quiz. And yeah, that's definitely organized fun is the best.
I love when she says in that episode, you want to click the marker or you want to close the markers until you hear a click.
Yes, we do not want those precious markers.
No.
The tips drying out. That would
No.
not be good. So yeah. Okay. What about you, Holly? Which one would you be?
So I definitely think that I am Rachel, with a little bit of Phoebe.
Okay, tell me why.
So I am definitely I think I'm quirky to some extent, like Phoebe, but not all the way. So that's why
Right.
I just say with a little
Okay,
bit
but why are you like Rachel?
yeah, okay. So that's actually a good question. Why am I like I don't know. I just feel like she is I have no idea. Why am I hold on. Hold on. I
Okay, I
think
have a reason.
okay, okay. Go ahead.
So you have confessed before on the podcast that you are super, super gullible.
Oh,
And I'm
yes.
pretty sure Rachel was like so gullible
Oh,
on the
yes.
show, right?
I
Like
am
she would,
very that's a good one.
yeah,
Yes, I
yeah,
am very gullible. I
yeah,
feel like Rachel also kind of is driven by her feelings.
yeah,
Whereas Monica is driven by like rules.
yes.
Rachel is very driven by her feelings, and that is so me. Like,
Hmm.
if I don't feel it, for the most part, I like can't do it. It's
Hmm.
hard to do. Um, and so, yeah, and I think that if I had the budget for it, I would probably shop as much as she does. So,
Maybe the key is you just need to get a job at whatever big store she worked at,
yes,
Ralph Lauren, right?
yes, yes.
And
Hmm.
then you can shop more.
I always feel like too, like the sort of predicaments that she got herself into, I can totally see myself getting into those
Yes.
predicaments
Yep.
and then not knowing how to get out of it or doing something stupid or
Yeah.
whatever. So yeah, yeah.
Oh,
And
that's
I'm
funny.
definitely a driver like she is. I don't know if you remember the
Oh my
episodes where she's like a crazy driver. She drives really fast and stuff like
yes.
that. I mean,
Yeah, Ross doesn't want her to drive
yeah,
because
he
she's
doesn't want her to
crazy.
drive. And so I do like to go faster. I am a safe driver. I'm safe. I
Yes.
am
You're safe.
I
I have ridden with you. You are
yes.
safe. But
But I
you
also don't go slow.
no. No. No going slow. No. I also tend to be a little bit on the faster side of driving, but I'm much more like a rule follower. Like
Yes, you
I
are.
I'm not usually going to take a lot of risks when it comes to driving. I
Yeah.
will be more on the like I will sit there and wait if I need to wait to turn. Like I don't know how I would live in Florida because you got to turn sometimes when it does not feel safe to turn.
Yes, I have had to learn to be a little bit more aggressive and
Yeah.
not aggressive in a bad way. It's almost sometimes more unsafe if you hesitate.
Yes.
So
Exactly.
you have to be a little bit more
Yeah.
aggressive. And I will say Florida driving is crazy. People are insane and I am anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was fearful for your life when I was down there riding. Not because of how you drove, but because of the
No.
way the roads are designed and the way the
And
people
because of the way that other people drive.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah.
Oh, well.
Yeah.
We got off track from the Friends episode, but anyway,
We
the
did.
Friends conversation. But anyway, so in our Facebook group, we will ask this question
Yeah.
that too, because we want to know. So again, if you want to tell us, and if you're listening and you're too young and you have never even watched an episode of Friends, then I don't know. I don't know. We're old. Then we grew up with this show, so
You can definitely tell what generation we're from.
yes, yes, we do not need to say it. Okay,
No,
so
we don't.
all right. Well, we are going to wrap this one up. So come back to the next, well, it will not be the next episode. It'll be episode 50. So next week will be an interview conversation. But
Mhm.
the week after that, we'll do part 2 of this little mini conversation about wellness. And we'll talk about relational and personal wellness. So make sure you
Yeah.
subscribe so you don't miss it. Thanks for joining us on the Christian Woman Leadership Podcast. If you enjoyed this conversation, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss a future episode. We look forward to chatting with you next week. And don't forget, your leadership matters, and it's time for you to embrace your gifts and lead with confidence.